All right, so welcome to another episode of Time Out with the Sports Doctor podcast, and we have another very special guest for you today, Miss Danielle Berman, who is an entrepreneur. She is a consultant, event management consultant, and she is the founder of Tackle What's Next. And you will find out all about what that platform is. Not just a podcast, it's not just a business. It is really a platform that she's using to help athletes transition from their sports to life after sports. So welcome, Danielle. Glad to have you here on the podcast.
Are you interested in real estate? Are you tired of hearing about all the money that your friends and colleagues are making from their investments, but you don't know where to start? Don't worry, I got you. We are teaming up with Dr. Ronnie, Shalev, and Shalwin Properties to equip you with the tools you need to feel empowered about your investments. So how do you get involved? Do these three things. First, go to my website at Dr.Derrick, thesportsdoctor.com, and click on the sponsor link for Shalwin Properties. This will give you access to a free webinar, as well as the ability to have a discovery call with Dr. Ronnie Shalev. Also, follow her on social media. And stay tuned for more helpful tips coming at you on Money Mondays. Now, back to the episode.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, so you gave me my first opportunity to do an Instagram Live when I was on your show. Well, we were probably about 3 months ago now. And that was really good, really great conversation. And since then, we've had several mutual guests, and Taj Jashan, Savania DeBarros, Dr. Gregory Charlotte. And, we know a lot of people in this small kind of sports business realm that we really kind of cross paths. And I'm really glad to have you here. And thank you for being a resource for this podcast.
Oh my goodness. Of course. I love it. I love seeing all the familiar faces on the show, and hopefully more to come, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Just getting started.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, thanks for having me. It's really great to be here, and I'm excited to get into it.
Sure. So let's start off with maybe your sports background, or what led you into a career kind of aligning with sports.
Sure. Yeah. I always say I played sports, but I never got the sports genes. So I liked sports, and I really enjoyed being a part of a team and the atmosphere, but the talent was not on my side. So I played a lot of sports in middle school and high school, but by my junior year in high school, I kind of moved on and was doing a lot more music and theater and things like that. But I was passionate about sports, and I knew I wanted to work in sports. And I thought, the business of sports would be really cool, get to be around some of my favorite games and around teams and things like that. So that's really was the driving factor for me. Was I knew I wanted to be in sports, but I wasn't going to make it to a high level playing sports. And so that's really where I decided, kind of set where I wanted to go to school based off of that. I went to college, studied sport management at Syracuse, and, just kind of learned a lot about the different avenues of sport business. But yeah, that was really the background. I will say I try to stay active now, but I've never been a huge athlete myself. Just more enjoying sports as fun and leisure.
Yeah, so it's funny, my career, same way. I decided to tap out at high school. Had an opportunity to continue at a small college to play football, but I knew at 5'9", 145, my chances of going pro as a football player were not likely, right?
Right.
So I always talk about athletes. At some point, you have to hang up the cleats. The ball stops dribbling. Some people it's in junior high, some people it's high school, some people it's as a professional athlete, but you still have to be ready for what's next. So I think it's awesome. My career, I'm still around the game of football. I'm still around athletes. I'm still around sports all the time. So I still get that same buzz and feeling from when I played. And, what about your experience? Are you still excited about being able to interact with athletes and help them with their careers?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think my excitement about sports is always like the team and the bonding and being able to be a part of something. And so I think working in sports gives you that same sense of team and, you're kind of all working towards a goal. And so with the work that, I'm doing with Tackle What's Next, I get to meet so many great people, either doing similar work or have played sports that are now doing amazing things or are figuring out where they're going to go next. And I think it's just an exciting place to be because there's so many opportunities out there. But yeah, it's fun to see behind the scenes a little bit and kind of see what people are doing off the court, off the field. What are their goals? What are their passions? And help them get there. So yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. That kind of being around the action is really a big part of the fun of it for sure.
Yeah. So you founded Tackle What's Next. How long ago? Over 3 years now, right?
Yeah, over 3 years. Hard to believe it's flown by, but yes, in 2019, so 3 years ago. And it really started off as events, as you mentioned. An events consultant and worked in sports after I graduated from school for a few different companies doing different conferences and sporting events, things like that. But started on my own doing some different events and consulting and saw this need for building a community of former and current athletes around what are you going to do when you graduate or when you retire and when it's time to move on, like you said, when the ball stops bouncing, where are you going to go? And so that's really where it started, just doing a couple of different events. And then people wanted to know what the next event was or what our website was, all those kinds of things. So I was like, oh, I guess I should build something here. I guess I should have a website for people to go to. So it really transformed out of that. But it's been an amazing 3 years. I will say there's been a lot of tough days. There's been a lot of challenging days, but overall, it's been a really fun journey to build this to where it is today.
So you mentioned kind of building a platform. Was it working on your job and you started to see a need for the platform that you built? And how did that kind of come about?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it came about right after school. I worked in the athletic department at Syracuse, and I got a really good sense, just like you said, that there was no way I was going to be at a top program playing sports, probably not even at any program. So I had no idea the time commitment that even recruits in my school were putting into their sport. But being a part of the student athlete experience from the business side, right? Being a part of the communications department, seeing how late these athletes were staying after games to do interviews and, meet with people and, do the press meetings, but then also at tutoring at night and study hall at the athletic department, right? There's so many different things that they had to do that me as a traditional student wasn't a part of my life. And that kind of stuck with me, I think, right from the get-go was these guys work really, really hard and they don't have a lot of free time. And then when I worked for a couple different organizations, one of them was for a former athlete right out of school that played professionally. And he had started his own business and, he had this great outlook on creating different companies and really using his time in the NFL as like a platform for whatever he wanted to get into. But he had so many teammates that did not do that and just didn't even know how to wrap their brain around leaving the sport. And they played for a lot longer and they were much bigger names, so to speak. And so that really stuck with me. I think when I left, working for other organizations and started my own organization, I was still getting calls from people that I knew that had retired saying, I need help with my resume, or I have an interview coming up, or, hey, can you help me organize some documents that I can't, my email's a mess and I don't know how to pay this or pay that. And I just said, it's kind of crazy that there's no like resources. And I did a lot of digging and I realized there's a lot of resources out there, but they don't seem to be utilizing these. Like, how do they know where to go? Like, it took me a while to find where these things were. And so that really stuck with me. So when I was doing a lot of consulting, I said, well, why don't I just put an event together for athletes to come together and talk about this experience and share what's working for them, what isn't working for them. And I think I learned a lot from those first couple events because it was mostly former NFL players, retired NFL players. And I started bringing in, companies and executives and CEOs and saying, hey, meet these people. And maybe there's like opportunities that'll come out of it. And what I learned was like, these guys just wanted to talk to each other. They didn't really care about the CEOs or the executives in the room, right? It was a nice touch, but they got more value out of talking amongst themselves and really having this connection and community around this topic that you just don't get to talk about a lot. And that's really what inspired me to kind of keep going and changing more into this content and connection and community versus jobs and opportunities and careers, right? So I learned a lot about that just from staying in touch with people and really seeing it play out in people I knew that I just said, how are they struggling? How could they be struggling? They're at the top of the world. And I had to really talk to them and say, like, what do you mean? What do you mean you don't know? What do you mean? It's just a lot of conversations that you don't have if you're in the general public, you don't know. And so I really got access to that kind of behind the scenes of individual people, and storytelling really will stick with you. And I think that's something that you and I both know in the work that we do is, one or two people telling you a story can really stay with you. And that's really what happened, is it just stuck with me. And I wanted to do something on my own to try to support those individuals, but in a bigger kind of impact and sustainable way.
So I guess when you started out, you were doing live events, correct? Because it's 2019. No
Yes.
one knew what COVID-19 was at that point.
Exactly. COVID-19 wasn't even in our radar. We weren't worried about it at all. So yes, we did one. I'm based in DC. We did one here in DC with the retired players chapter of the NFLPA. And that was a really great learning experience. And it was awesome. And that was where, we had the guys just kind of chatting with each other and really getting value out of that. And then we did one in-person event before COVID really hit in Super Bowl in 2020. And that one was a little bit bigger. You
did an event at the Super Bowl?
Yeah, we did it during Super Bowl week,
Tell
a few days
that.
before. It was fun. It was awesome. But yeah, it just showed the interest. People were coming in, they were popping in even around their crazy schedules for that week, right? They were showing up and being a part of this conversation. But yeah, so they were in person. And I think the big thing that we found is like people really were excited to share their own stories, whether they played football or soccer or basketball or ran track, whatever it was. These men and women were really eager to share and help the next generation of athletes. And so that really stood out to me. And then, like you said, it was all in person, and then COVID hit, and I kind of had to do a big shift of, okay, well, we can't do in-person events anymore. What are we going to do? And so I just said, all right, I know how to use Zoom. Let's do some virtual events. And
well, you were well ahead if you already knew how to use Zoom.
Yeah.
I think we all learned since 2020, to be
exactly. Honest. Yeah. I had used it for work that I had done in the past. And like you said, I was lucky to know about it and have some basic knowledge of how to use it. So we did our first virtual event in April of 2020 because it was supposed to be in person. And that was a wild ride. And 2 years later, we've done about 8 different virtual summits that have grown to be much more logistically complicated than the first one on Zoom. And we've done a ton of different live streams and IG live interviews and podcasts and things like that since then. But yeah, it kind of changed and helped us jump forward a little bit because, I was really thinking about live events, wasn't worried about our online presence and digital, what we were doing. And as we all experience, COVID forced me to kind of say, all right, well, we need to do this now. We need to get online. We need to have a presence out there. So that's really what we've been focused on now. And, now we're at a point where we're like, I think we need to get back out there in person and do a little bit more of that too. So we got to find a good balance.
And I think it's interesting how you mentioned at first you were trying to bridge a gap between athletes and corporations, but you found that athletes wanted to interact with each other more and kind of partner up with each other more. I thought that was very interesting because athletes are truly their own brand. And once an athlete can discover the power that they have, social media or building their own platform, it's amazing when I watch some of the athletes that I'm affiliated with post a video and just how many views they can get in 4 or 6 hours and how many likes and comments. So if you're willing to use your platform to promote yourself, especially in a positive manner, your words and your story is really needed.
The Sabre training bat is like no other training bat you've ever used before. So the purpose of the Sabre training bat with its modified barrel is so that you can perfectly sequence and get behind the ball, getting the bat on plane sooner, creating less miss hits, more line drives, higher batting averages, and more exit velocity. The Sabre training bat is the #1 training bat on the market. Sabre Bats, the training bat that's going to take you to your best swing.
100%. And you brought up a good point. I think the opportunity to have a community around being an athlete, right? And you know this just from your own sports experience, like nobody really knows unless you reach that point, what you and your teammates go through. And I think it's helpful to talk to athletes, not only in your sport, but in other sports, to say, oh my God, it's not just me. It's not just my team. It's not just my experience. Like other people have these challenges or experiences too. It could be good or bad. But just like that camaraderie of being a college or a professional athlete, being an Olympian, there's a lot of value you can find in just sharing stories with each other. And of course, I think the big thing we found is there's just so many people that want to help. Like you said, they want to share their story, not just to promote themselves, which is obviously very good and they should do that, but to help that next generation struggle less, to say, hey, you need to be thinking about what you're going to do after sports right now, while you're in high school, while you're in middle school, while you're a freshman in college, start doing this stuff, because that's what we found. A lot of people just want to share what they did and what they didn't do and what they wish they would have known, for that next generation to really learn from them.
So I think part of it too is from a community standpoint, just looking on, watching sports. Many of these athletes are glorified and you want them to be perfect, almost like a superhero. And you don't want them to be vulnerable in any type of way. Don't show any flaws, don't show any weakness. So being able to relate with each other, I think that's one of the most important things about building community for athletes, just like building community for many other things that you're doing, from entrepreneurship or investing. Being able to be surrounded by like-minded people is very powerful, especially when you're able to take down that shield and take off the armor and just be yourself and not have to be bravado or whatever it is to feel like you have to be that perfect individual. So,
yeah, no, 100%. And we've done workshops with, young athletes as young as 10, 11, 12, all the way to retired athletes that are, in their 30s, and sometimes older. And I think the big thing we see is amongst friends, it's so much easier to be open and to be vulnerable. It's not easy for every single individual. And of course, there's things that people are like, oh, I don't want to say, I don't want to talk, right? But once you get the conversation going and you have a couple brave people that start to share, the walls, the layers peel, and the walls come down and everybody starts to say, oh my gosh, like, yeah, I needed to talk about, I didn't even know I needed to talk about this, but I needed to talk about it. Right. So it's conversation, and the stuff that you and I do when we do these interviews and these conversations, just doing them more and more, telling stories and sharing. It's really, it's not a solution in itself, but it's a part of a big solution of how can we solve problems. It's by talking to each other and sharing and being vulnerable. So we have a long way to go, but I think it's a really good start and a positive start that, we're seeing a lot more conversations with athletes being vulnerable and saying I'm struggling or saying I need help.
So this is your chance to kind of brag on Tackle What's Next. What do you feel has been your greatest accomplishment working with athletes, or what problem do you feel like you helped solve?
Oh my goodness. So I would hope that we have helped people find community in this solution or in this challenge of, what am I going to do? How do I kind of move on from my sport? But I would say our biggest accomplishment so far has just been bringing people together. I think I've just been so blown away by the support we've gotten. I think that the relationships we've been able to build and the collaboration we've been able to achieve with other organizations in the same space and people doing similar work. I would say that's my biggest achievement, because none of this happens without a select few people 3 years ago saying, I like what Danielle's doing and I'm going to reach out to this person for her. I'm going to make this introduction. So, those people know who they are. And I think, there's many that are doing incredible, amazing things now in the same space. And, I think that to me is a huge accomplishment that I was able to be in their space and support them. And so I think, the goal of Tackle What's Next is, and eventually we don't need to be here. This is happening in campuses and on teams all over the country without us hosting these conversations. They're just happening and everyone feels comfortable talking about this. So, that's a long-term goal. But I think, what we try to do is just talk about it. Let's just open the door. A lot more is going to have to happen. You need to have resources. You need to have all kinds of things set up for that conversation to really make a difference, but it's a first step. And that's what we're really trying to be, is a first step for athletes looking for resources and community, and a first step for teams, organizations, and support staff looking for that. How do I get people to the table? How do I get people to take advantage of my resources I'm offering? So that's our goal. And I would say, we can't do it by ourselves. Nobody's perfect, and including me. So it's taken a lot of helping hands to get where we are now.
Sure. And for those that are interested, what's going to be your next virtual summit, and how do people get involved with that?
Yeah, we're really excited. We're in the planning process right now. So likely in spring or summer 2023, you'll see something coming out. We're toggling between virtual only or virtual and in person. So that's why we have a little bit of a TBD on it. But we just did an amazing entrepreneurship summit in October, which was really, really cool. Had a lot of athlete founders on talking about their experiences, and we'll be focusing on identity and mental health in the spring. So it'll be really powerful. So we're really excited to put that together. So stay tuned. Always find all that information on our website too. As soon as we have dates, we always post it out there. So looking for April to June, somewhere in that window.
All right, perfect. So on TimeOut with the Sports Doctor, this is your final timeout. So I really want you to speak to the athlete or young entrepreneur who has a dream, who has a platform in their mind, but who really has been kind of paralyzed by fear or paralyzed by saying, oh, this already exists, to be able to put it into action. So just speak to that person about why their voice is needed and why, the sports realm needs more people to get connection started.
Yeah, it's such a good question. And I think it's so accurate. I think a lot of people feel this way, like, what can I do? How can I help? And I would say, you just never know who's watching you. You never know who's looking at you. You never know who's taking example from you. I think to say that it's already exists, do it better, reach out, connect, collaborate, find the gap that this one thing that exists doesn't fill. So I think the biggest kind of misnomer out there is, if it already exists, kind of give up and walk away. But there's so many amazing people working in this space with me that are all doing it in their own way. And we need each one of them. We need every single person, because there's so many people in need that one person can't solve the problem. And so you're a unique individual. If you have a great idea and you want to do something and you want to make a difference, get started and reach out to those people that are already doing it and say, hey, I'm trying to do this too. Can I talk to you? Can I learn from you? Can I, see what you do every day and see how I can make an impact too? And I think the biggest thing is just start. You're never going to be ready. You're never going to feel perfectly prepared. You just have to start, and it will guide you a little bit in terms of where to go from there. But take the leap if you feel like you're ready in your own way. It doesn't have to be full time. It doesn't have to be a business. It could just be a hobby, or it could be something you do in your spare time. But take the leap and get started, because you just never know where it will take you.
Absolutely. And take the leap. That's a shameless plug for a previous episode with Jason Shin. So go back and listen to that. But yeah, so you mentioned that's a recurring theme on this podcast. It's really just start. Imperfect action today is better than waiting to be perfect tomorrow or down the road, because you will never be perfect in your first attempt at anything. And, striving for perfection is good, but we want to have action. Because you're going to learn as you go. And truthfully, the journey is the more important part to define who you are than trying to strive to be perfect. and package everything before you present it. Because someone, like you mentioned, someone is waiting to hear your voice and hear your story, and they're going to be impacted by it. So please just share where you are and get started.
Yeah, so well said. I don't think I have anything to add to that. So well said on that note. Just start, and you're going to make an impact. And worst case, you're going to learn along the way and be ready for the next opportunity. So no downfall.
Yeah. So tell everyone how they can follow you on social media. Give them your website address and how they can connect with you.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find us at Tackle What's Next on all social media. And our website is www.tacklewhatsnext.com. We are not on TikTok yet. A lot of people have asked, why are we not on TikTok? It's because I don't know how to do TikTok. So I'm aging myself a little bit. I got to get some young folks in to teach me how to do the TikTok stuff. But we're everywhere else on social at Tackle What's Next, and then tacklewhatsnext.com is our website. So we got a weekly newsletter. If you're interested in checking out stuff that we got going on, you can always subscribe to that. But yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for sharing on this platform, and I look forward to continue to collaborate with you on future events and also on future guests.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Derek. This was great. And yes, first of many collaborations, or I guess I should say second of many collaborations. Right. And looking forward to them all. Thanks again for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for continuing to support this podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, then please leave a 5-star review. And if you haven't done so, subscribe so you continue to get the updated episodes. Until later, peace. Hey, time out with the sports doctor. Keep our head right in the game. We ain't never stopping. You are now tuned in. Trust you don't want to miss. This is where life, sports, and medicine